Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when steam curled through narrow alleyways, wooden sandals clacked on stone, and people got way too comfortable being naked with their neighbors. Yep, we're stepping into the bathhouses of Edo, Japan. And if you're imagining a peaceful private spa experience, you may want to lower those expectations gently. Because bathing in Edo wasn't just about getting clean, it was about community, routine, social rules, and yes, sometimes being judged for how long you soaked. You're going to learn the etiquette of the bucket splash, the politics of water temperature, and why no one, used soap like you think they did. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me your city and the exact time you're listening to this. I love seeing where and when you all tune in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off a dirt road into a quiet side street in Edo, the old Tokyo, somewhere between the smell of grilled fish and the distant sound of a shamisen playing in someone's courtyard. The wooden signs ahead read, Yuya, meaning bathhouse. You know what's coming, but you're not quite prepared. The door slides open. Steam greets your face like a blanket with attitude. Everything smells like cedar, ash, and warm minerals. Inside, a few people are already lining up their buckets, unwrapping towels, and very much disrobing. You hesitate. They don't. In this era, the bath isn't just a private retreat, it's a public routine. A daily one, if you can afford it. And even if you can't, you'll still find a way in, because Edo was a city obsessed with bathing. At its peak, Edo had hundreds of public bathhouses, serving a population of over 1 million. That's a lot of hot water. Some historians argue it had the highest per capita bathing rate in the pre-modern world. Others suggest that bathhouses weren't just about cleaning, they were about clocking in to the rhythms of city life. You look around. Everything is made of wood, planks, buckets, benches, floors that creak when you step. No plumbing. No taps. Just heat, buckets, and a water basin filled from a giant fire-warmed tank in the back. The steam is so thick it feels like you're walking through a cloud that's slightly judging you for not scrubbing behind your ears. Here's something surprising. Most people in Edo didn't have private baths. Even wealthy households often relied on public sento to avoid the risk of fire. Because heating water indoors with charcoal stoves? That's how cities burned down. Bathhouses became essential infrastructure, like water wells or tofu stands. And that's where you find yourself, wrapped in a towel, sitting nervously on a tiny wooden stool beside someone who seems way too comfortable scrubbing their back with a cloth the size of a napkin. But the atmosphere is calmer than you expected. People don't talk loudly. No splashing. No playing. Everyone has a task, a ritual. Water is poured over the shoulders like a silent bow. Buckets are refilled with precision. There's a rhythm to it, like communal choreography. You feel like you've stepped into a temple of steam. You hear a low murmur nearby. Someone's talking about the rice harvest. Another is discussing the local kabuki actor's new scandal. The bathhouse isn't just for bathing, it's for sharing news, forming alliances, and low-key passive-aggressive commentary. You catch a phrase about someone's laundry being less white than usual. Burn. And then you see it, the udono, the big, square soaking tub. The holy grail of hot water. It's steaming. It's inviting. It's also the temperature of regret. People enter it slowly, adjusting their breath, their bodies, their expectations. Some just stand in it briefly. Others fully submerge and vanish into a meditative haze. You take a step toward it, bucket in hand. A caretaker raises an eyebrow. Washed already? He asks. You shake your head. Big mistake. In Edo, you wash first, then you soak. No exceptions. No skipping. Soap doesn't even enter the equation yet. We'll get to that. The caretaker gives you a polite but firm nod toward the washing area. You retreat, humbled. Clearly, there are unspoken rules, and everyone here knows them by heart. As you scrub, awkwardly, quickly, trying not to knock over someone's wooden sandals, you realize something. You're not just bathing. You're being initiated. You're entering a centuries-old ritual, one that's surprisingly democratic. Here, status means less. Rich and poor, old and young, everyone bathes. The only real hierarchy is temperature tolerance and towel folding technique. You pour a final bucket over your back. The heat hits just right. Okay, now you're ready for the you don't know. You step in slowly, carefully, breath held. Your legs say no. Your pride says yes. And just like that, you're in, floating, sweating, thinking, how is everyone so calm about this? You glance around. No one notices you. You belong now. You're part of the steam. The steam swirls around your face like a lazy ghost, and you're finally starting to feel the point of it all. Muscles relaxing. Breath slowing. Skin quietly questioning its life choices. You're in the big cedar tub now, shoulder deep, sharing the water with 6 strangers who all seem much more serene than you. But just as you're settling in, something shifts. A soft cough. A glance exchanged. A whisper behind a towel. You've entered the true heart of Edo bathing culture, not just the heat, but the drama. Because as it turns out, public baths in Edo weren't just places to clean your body, they were hubs of social chemistry. And by chemistry, we mean side eyes, hushed gossip, unexpected alliances, and the occasional scandal delivered in 40 degrees Celsius water. You glance to your left. An older woman is frowning at a younger man's soaking technique. On your right, 2 merchants are whispering, something about rice prices and someone's cousin's borrowed robe. It hits you, this isn't a bathhouse. It's a neighborhood newsroom. And everyone here is both editor and columnist. Most sento were split by neighborhood, meaning people came here every day, same time, same faces. It was where deals were made, engagements were discussed, feuds were simmered. Think of it like a gym, a co-working space, and a family group chat, all soaking in hot water together. And the best part? You couldn't hide anything. No clothes, no makeup, no flattering angles. Just you, your bucket, and whatever awkward mole you've never noticed before. It made people more equal. And, let's be honest, occasionally more judgy. You hear someone cough again. A little louder this time. That's not a health cough. That's a, you're sitting in my usual spot, cough. You discreetly slide over. Crisis averted. The bathhouse also had a unique hierarchy, not based on class or wealth, but on behavior and familiarity. First-timers like you were easy to spot. Towels slightly too damp, eyes scanning for cues, sitting too far from the wall. Regulars had their own subtle patterns, a preferred hook for their clothes, a signature bucket, a post-soak tea habit. There were unwritten rules, and breaking them could get you a solid reputation. Not in a good way. Some examples. A don't wring your towel into the bath. Ever. A don't splash. Unless you're under 5 years old. And even then, the elders will still judge. A don't start conversations in the soaking tub unless someone else initiates. Silence here is aesthetic. A don't stare, but also, don't aggressively look away. It's complicated. You once read somewhere that Edo was a city of faces, because everyone saw everyone all the time. The bathhouse made that literal. You saw the same people literally naked, every day. It created a strange kind of intimacy. Like neighbors who knew your bath temperature preference better than your birthday. And yet, despite the potential for awkwardness, people came back. Daily. Religiously. Because this space wasn't just about hygiene, it was a controlled vulnerability zone. You saw each other tired, bare, relaxed. You noticed when someone didn't show up for 2 days. You checked in without words. There's a famous saying from the Edo period, at the bathhouse, even a lord is just another back to scrub. And it's true. Rank meant little here. Samurai, merchants, monks, they all soaked the same, sat on the same stools, and dipped into the same steam. Even if grudges existed outside, inside the sento, things softened. Literally and figuratively. Of course, that didn't stop a few arguments. Or so you hear from the bath attendant, a fast-talking man with more gossip than the town crier. He tells you about a time two rival fish vendors tried to out-soak each other. Or when a courtesan snubbed a merchant's wife with a perfectly timed hair flip. You're 40% sure he's exaggerating, but you love it anyway. You start to notice things you missed before. How certain regulars have unofficial seats. How some people bring wooden charms to rest beside their buckets. How the atmosphere shifts subtly between weekday evenings and festival days, like the whole building breathes differently. And as you finally get out of the tub, wrap yourself in your towel, and pour cool water down your back, you realize something. Bathing in Edo isn't about isolation. It's about immersion. Not just in water, but in community. In ritual. In the kind of shared experience that's quiet, steamy, and full of microdramas you'll never forget. You sit on the wooden ledge, legs still tingling from the scalding water, towel draped across your lap like it knows more about etiquette than you do. You've made it through the entry rites. You've survived the side eyes. But you're still not quite prepared for what comes next. Everyone is naked. Absolutely everyone. And somehow, no one cares. It hits you like a low wave of second-hand awkwardness. You're used to dressing rooms with dividers, discreet towel shuffles, and the unspoken art of don't look directly at anything. But here, people walk confidently, proudly, from the bench to the bucket to the steam, like their bodies were just bodies. Which, of course, they are. In Edo period Japan, communal nudity wasn't considered shameful, it was considered practical. Cleanliness trumped modesty. And while there were regional variations, many bathhouses, especially in the earlier Edo period, were fully mixed gender spaces. You blink. Yep, you heard that right. Men and women. Bathing together. Completely unclothed. Daily. You inch your towel a little higher. But here's the twist. For most Edo people, this wasn't scandalous. It was normal. The bath was a space of de-eroticized routine. Families bathed together. Neighbors bathed together. And unless someone really broke the social rules, it wasn't even considered inappropriate. That said, you do notice certain glances. A younger man sneaking a quick look before pretending to stare at the ceiling. An old woman raising her eyebrow so high it practically levitates. So yeah, human nature still shows up now and then. But overall, the vibe is chill. You're much more concerned about where to put your wooden hairpin than whether someone's looking at your elbows. You begin to pick up on little details. Children are everywhere, splashing like mini whirlwinds. A toddler dumps a full bucket of water onto an unsuspecting elder, who simply grunts and gestures for another. No one scolds. No one panics. This is intergenerational nudity, and somehow it works. You ask the bath attendant later if people ever got, inappropriate. He laughs. Only if they're drunk. And then the others throw them out before we have to. You believe him. You've seen how tightly this space polices itself, not with rules posted on walls, but with communal expectation. Still, not everyone agreed with mixed bathing. In fact, by the mid-1700s, officials started getting nervous. They issued bans, built screens, even tried assigning hours by gender. But enforcement? Spotty at best. Many bathhouses simply ignored the orders or got creatively flexible. Oh yes, men and women bathe separately. He's just leaving while she's just arriving. Slowly. Historians still argue over how widespread mixed bathing really was. Some say it was mainly urban and pragmatic. Others believe it was exaggerated by foreign observers hoping to make Edo Japan seem exotic or morally dubious. The truth. Probably somewhere in between. You lean back against the warm wooden paneling, letting your body dry in the rising steam. A little kid runs past, giggling, towel flapping like a tiny flag of freedom. No one reacts. You don't either. Because by now, you get it. In the bathhouse, bodies aren't statements. They're just part of the routine. Old ones. Young ones. Soft, wrinkled, strong, scarred. No filters. No retouching. No angles. Just honesty, and a lot of humidity. You start to feel something rare, discomfort leaving your body, not through effort, but through acceptance. No one here is perfect, and no one needs to be. The steam smooths everything into the same quiet outline. You've never felt more human, or more okay with it. You're back on the little wooden stool, perched next to a bucket that seems far too small for the task at hand. You've just come out of the hottest bath your body has ever tolerated, and now it's time for what you assume is the real cleaning. Soap, shampoo, foam, that squeaky clean feeling you're used to. So you reach for the soap tray, and find nothing. Just a damp cloth. Maybe two. No bottles. No bubbles. No suspiciously scented gels with words like ocean breeze or zen energy. You blink. Are you missing something? Is this like when the locals don't tell tourists where the real sushi spot is? Turns out, you're not missing anything. Because in Edo Japan, people didn't really use soap. You sit back and stare at your cloth. Your new, slightly disappointing companion. It's called a tenugui, a rectangular strip of cotton fabric used for just about everything. Washing, drying, wrapping, covering your head when you're feeling mysterious. And yes, scrubbing your entire body. So how did they get clean? The technique is surprisingly simple and shockingly effective. First, you splash water over yourself. Lots of water. Then, you soak the tenugui, wring it out, and scrub. Hard. Not gentle lathering. We're talking friction. Physical exfoliation. You scrub until your skin goes pink and your past sins start to feel like they're flaking off. And that's it. No soap. The heat from the bath loosens dirt. The scrubbing removes it. And the rinse carries it away. You suddenly realize that the process is less about coating your skin in chemicals and more about listening to your body. Where it's tight. Where it's tired. Where it's been ignored. It's oddly therapeutic. You look around and notice everyone is doing it. Some with the same cloth they probably brought from home, others with ones provided by the bathhouse. You see a man scrubbing his back with an over-the-shoulder twist that feels like yoga. A woman dabs her elbows in a little bowl of warm water before scrubbing like she's cleaning antique furniture. And then there are the extras. Some folks bring bran bags, small pouches filled with rice bran, which acts like a natural scrub and skin softener. Others use mugwort leaves or even ash, depending on what they believe, draws out impurities. One man mutters that soap is too slippery to trust. You have no idea what that means, but you respect the commitment. You ask an older bather if they've ever used modern soap. He laughs. Once. Slipped on the floor. Never again. Respect. Interestingly, soap did exist in Edo, Japan. It just wasn't common. Made from lye or ash, it was harsh, expensive, and mostly used for laundry or in medical settings, not something you'd slap on your face every morning. For everyday cleaning, people preferred what they knew: heat, water, cloth, and rhythm. Academics still debate whether this method was as hygienic as modern washing. Some say it removed enough bacteria to be effective, especially given the frequency of bathing. Others point out that the hot water alone was likely killing off most of the germs. But what everyone agrees on is this: Edo people were exceptionally clean by global standards of the time. So there you are, scrubbing with your tenugui, no foam in sight, feeling surprisingly fresh. Your skin tingles, not from chemicals, but from being seen to. From attention. From care. You finish with a final rinse, using a wooden ladle to pour hot water slowly over your shoulders. It's simple. It's quiet. It's completely different from your usual shower routine with 11 half-used bottles and a playlist that always starts with lo-fi hip-hop. And for the first time in a long while, you feel clean, not just physically but mentally. You hang your tenugui on the hook beside you. It flutters slightly in the warm air, like a little white flag of surrender. You've officially made peace with the soapless bath. You're finally getting the hang of this whole bathing thing. You've accepted the nudity, befriended your tenugui, and even mastered the hot water glide in without making that awkward, "ow but I am trying to look calm" face. But then someone hands you a bucket. Not for carrying things. Not for storage. but for bathing. Entirely. In a bucket. You stare at it. It's wooden, round, and about the size of a medium mixing bowl. You could fit a loaf of bread in it. Maybe two. Definitely not a person. But in Edo, Japan, this little bucket is your personal spa station. Before modern plumbing and indoor tubs, full-body baths weren't always the default. In fact, many people in Edo bathed at home not with a tub, but with a small bucket, a ladle, and a dream. This system worked surprisingly well when the full public sento wasn't an option, due to distance, bad weather, or that one time you just really didn't want to talk to anyone. The process. Surprisingly elegant. Step 1. Fill the bucket with heated water. Not boiling, unless you want to confess to crimes you didn't commit. Just warm enough to loosen up your back and any emotional baggage. Step 2. Sit on a stool or squat near the bucket. Use a ladle to pour the water over your body, slowly and deliberately, like a tiny water priest blessing your limbs. There's no rush. No water pressure blasting your eardrums. Just gravity, silence, and steam. Step 3. Scrub. With your tenugui, of course. Or, if you're feeling fancy, with a handful of rice husks or even grated daikon. Yes, the vegetable. Apparently, it helps exfoliate. You're skeptical but intrigued. And here's the surprise. Even in these minimalist setups, people could get thoroughly clean. In fact, many preferred it to the public bath. It was quieter, gentler, and oddly introspective. You learn that samurai, for instance, often did bucket baths at home, not because they were shy, but because they preferred privacy and a chance to meditate while washing off the day. Plus, in a city like Edo, with its wooden homes packed tightly together, water wasn't always abundant. Heating it took effort, usually over a fire fueled by scrap wood or charcoal. The bucket method was economical, safe, and didn't involve risking your entire house to take a relaxing soak. You ask your host how people without fireplaces managed. Oh, they reply, some would go to the public bath just for hot water. Wait, what? Yes. In some neighborhoods, Sento offered hot water delivery. You'd bring your bucket, fill it up, and head home like a slow-moving soup courier. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. And, if you timed it right, you could catch the warmest batch. Children also learned to bathe this way. Carefully, splash by splash. A rite of passage wasn't their first step into the big bath, but mastering the bucket bath without soaking the floor. You watch a young girl do it now, with the seriousness of a tea ceremony. Ladle. Pause. Pour. Repeat. You try it yourself, outside the bathhouse under a covered patio, just to see. You fill your bucket with steaming water, kneel beside it, and begin to pour. Shoulders. Chest. Legs. There's something comforting in the repetition. Intimate. Like returning to a version of you who doesn't need gadgets, playlists, or a 12-step cleansing routine. Just you, the water, and the wooden echo of a quieter world. Historians note that while full-body tubs existed, they were far more common in bathhouses than homes. Most people in Edo didn't have the luxury of space or heat. A small fire-heated bath was a big deal. A copper tub? Reserved for the wealthy. For everyone else, buckets weren't a compromise, they were the standard. You finish your bucket bath feeling clean, centered, slightly confused about the daikon, but that's okay. You dump the last of the water onto the stones, watch it sizzle and fade. And in that moment, you realize, this tiny bucket may not look like much, but in Edo, Japan, it's an entire philosophy. The sun has dipped below the tiled rooftops, and paper lanterns begin to glow like quiet moons along the alley. You're just stepping back into the bathhouse after a tea break, feeling refreshed, modestly smug, and absolutely ready to soak again, until you see the little wooden sign hanging near the door. Women's Hour. And just like that, you're out. A polite but firm attendant waves you off with a smile that says, "Nice try, buddy." Welcome to the very flexible world of bathhouse gender scheduling, where rules existed, kind of, sometimes, depending on the decade, the bathhouse owner, and the general mood of the neighborhood. During the early Edo period, mixed bathing was common, as you already know. But as the city grew, so did its moral policing. Official edicts began cracking down on co-ed bathing, citing modesty and public order. Some of these were passed with the kind of stern, bureaucratic language that suggests at least one official had a personal grudge about being splashed in public. So, what did bathhouses do? They got creative. Rather than fully splitting men and women into separate buildings, which would have been expensive and logistically annoying, many bathhouses simply introduced time-based segregation. That is, certain hours were for women, and others for men. Sounds sensible, right? It was. In theory. In practice, things got blurry. You walk around the bathhouse's outer courtyard and peek through a small gap in the wood, just enough to see the inside has shifted. The chatter is higher-pitched. The steam smells faintly of citrus. Someone's singing softly. It's women's time, and the whole atmosphere changes. During designated women-only hours, bathhouses often became micro-sanctuaries. A place to rest sore backs, untangle children's hair, complain about husbands, and exchange secret recipes for hair oil or miso soup. You're told that women often bathed in groups, usually with relatives or close neighbors, and the space took on a rhythm that felt slower, rounder, more intimate than the brisk, efficient soaks you've seen during men's hours. But here's the catch: not all men respected the sign. You hear whispers, some funny, some unsettling, of men pretending to be bathhouse cleaners just to sneak a glance. Others accidentally, arriving early to catch the tail end of women's time. In response, some bathhouses put up screens, hired female-only attendants, or rearranged entry paths to make things more private. One old-timer tells you about a woman who once dumped a bucket of cold water over a peeping guest. Right over the top of the screen, he chuckles. Perfect aim. Respect. Meanwhile, the edicts kept coming. The government tried to enforce stricter rules, but these were often ignored or, better yet, performed just enough to avoid consequences. Screens went up, and then quietly slid aside. Hours were posted, and then routinely fudged. As long as things looked orderly on paper, the actual practices danced between tradition and convenience. Historians still debate how effective these rules really were. Some claim many bathhouses returned to co-ed hours by the late Edo period due to demand. Others argue that female-only hours became increasingly popular, not just for modesty, but because they created rare public spaces where women could relax, speak freely, and not be on display. And it wasn't just adults. You learn that girls were sometimes allowed into men's hours until a certain age, and vice versa, especially in smaller neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone and the idea of inappropriate felt more theoretical than actual. You find yourself standing outside, sipping cold barley tea, listening to the muffled laughter of women soaking and gossiping inside. You wonder if they're talking about you. Probably not. But still. Eventually, the little wooden sign flips back. You step inside again. The air feels different. Warmer, maybe. Or maybe you're imagining it. And you think, segregation didn't just divide the bathhouse, it shaped it. Not as a rulebook, but as a rhythm. A flow. A negotiation between practicality, modesty, and who needed the bath more at that hour. You sink back into the water, a little more patient, a little more respectful, and maybe a little more impressed with the woman who nailed that guy with a bucket. You've now experienced the nudity, the silence, the bucket, and the gender flip-flopping hours. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for what happens when you try to lower yourself into the bath again. Your toe touches the water, and you immediately retract it like you've stepped on lava. You try again. Nope. It's hotter. You look around to see if anyone else is struggling. They're not. A man is already sitting chest deep, casually humming. A grandmother just stepped in like it was lukewarm soup. One woman is pouring more hot water in. You, meanwhile, are squatting like a nervous cat. This, dear friend, is your initiation into one of Edo Japan's steamiest traditions, literally. Baths here weren't just warm, they were furnace hot. We're talking 44 to 48 degrees Celsius, sometimes higher. Hotter than a hot tub. Hotter than your regrets. So hot that some people say it was the real reason everyone looked calm. They couldn't move. You finally ease in. Inch by inch. Your skin tingles, then screams, then adjusts. Kind of. In Edo culture, the hotter the bath, the better the character. This wasn't just about heat tolerance, it was about endurance, restraint, self-discipline. Flinching, weak, splashing, amateur, complaining, social suicide. You sit there, face frozen in polite serenity, while your inner monologue sounds like a kettle boiling in 4 languages. But the strangest part? It starts to feel good. Once you surrender to the heat, something shifts. Your muscles let go. Your thoughts quiet down. Even your pride relaxes. You're melting, slowly, like a human mochi. Around you, others soak in near silence. Only the occasional sough of a satisfied breath or the ladle's soft scoop into a wooden bucket. You ask a regular later how they got used to it. She grins. I didn't. I just stopped resisting. Classic. The high temperatures had more than just philosophical appeal. Edo people believed hot baths helped circulation, skin health, and even mood. It was a full body reset, a cure for fatigue, and sometimes a polite excuse to avoid doing anything productive afterward. Interestingly, the heat wasn't always natural. It had to be fired. Literally. Bathhouses relied on large iron kettles heated by wood or charcoal. The bathwater sat above these roaring fires, constantly stirred and monitored. That job often fell to the Japan, the boiler keeper, who managed the flames and occasionally added herbal mixes or minerals to enhance the experience. You hear rumors that some bathhouses competed over who had the hottest bath, as if they were bragging, "Our water can remove sadness and fingerprints." But not everyone agreed. In fact, some Edo doctors warned against the trend, claiming it could cause dizziness, dry skin, or, in extreme cases, actual fainting. Did people listen? Of course not. The hotter the bath, the stronger the spirit. Academic opinions were cool. The bath was not. Some bathhouses even developed temperature zones, where different tubs had varying levels of heat. You imagine a polite sign, left for beginners, right for boiling your soul. But often, it was just one tub, one option, go hot or go home. You shift slightly in the water and feel the temperature bite your collarbone. It's intense. But now you understand it's not about comfort. It's a test of composure, and everyone here is passing like it's an exam they studied for with inner peace and firewood. Eventually, you stand, water dripping from your skin like you've just survived something sacred. You wrap yourself in your tenugui, cheeks flushed, and walk back to the stool. A man near the door raises an eyebrow and asks, "Not too hot?" You pause, bow slightly, and say, "Just right." And in that moment, you're not just clean. You're initiated. You're drying off beside a wooden lattice window, steam still rising faintly from your skin, when you realize something strange. Despite the full house, the bathhouse is eerily quiet. You tilt your head. No loud conversation. No giggles. No yelling. Just the occasional slosh, drip, or a soft sigh. It's like everyone collectively agreed, we are here to soak, not to socialize. Welcome to one of the most unexpectedly elegant rules of Edo bathhouse culture. No talking in the tub. Not because it's rude. Not because it's forbidden. But because, here, silence is part of the soak. You glance around the main bath again. People are fully immersed, eyes closed, faces neutral. Some lean gently against the smooth cedar walls. One man seems to be meditating, or maybe asleep. Either way, no one is chit-chatting about the price of tofu or the weather. And that's intentional. Edo period bathhouses had their noisy moments, especially outside the tub. Children laughing near the washing area. Neighbors chatting while drying off. The occasional enthusiastic retelling of a kabuki scene by the lockers. But once inside the udono, the vibe shifts to something borderline spiritual. You wonder if it's respect, or tradition, or just the kind of collective self-regulation that happens when everyone decides, we're not doing that here. Either way, you find yourself whispering, even to yourself. You learn later that this quietness wasn't written on a sign. It was understood, like how to pour tea for an elder or how not to stare at a samurai's sword. An unspoken rhythm. Even bathhouse attendants kept things subtle. If someone got too loud, they might approach and gently offer a towel or a new bucket, not as punishment, but as a polite nudge to read the room. And if that didn't work, the regulars had a system, the communal cough. You've already heard it before. That little ahem with extra meaning. That's the Edo version of SHHH. Of course, not everyone followed this quiet code. Especially during festivals or after too much sake, the volume could spike. In fact, some bathhouses had a reputation for being more social than serene, places where deals were whispered, romances negotiated, and gossip flowed even hotter than the bath. But those were the exceptions. In most places, especially in the evenings, bathing was a kind of group meditation. And it makes sense when you think about it. After a long day of navigating crowded markets, noisy streets, clanging bell towers, and neighbors arguing about who borrowed whose sandals, silence becomes a kind of luxury. Here, soaking without speaking wasn't just good manners. It was an invitation to slow down, to listen to the water, to breathe. There's even an old saying from the time, a quiet bath reveals a noisy heart. Meaning, of course, that once the world around you goes quiet, you might actually hear what your brain's been yelling about all day. You sit there in the silence, and you feel it, a subtle spaciousness in the room. Like the air isn't just warm, but patient. Like the bath is holding you in something deeper than water. You notice how people time their breathing to the rhythm of the ladle. How even footsteps sound softened. How your own thoughts seem to exhale. And sure, a few people whisper occasionally. A grandmother chuckling with her granddaughter. A merchant grumbling under his breath about rising rice prices. But even these moments feel soft-edged, wrapped in the steam. You stay longer than usual, reluctant to break the spell. But eventually, your skin tells you it's time to get out. You dry off, careful not to break the silence, and step into the dressing room. Only then, just then, does the noise start again. Low voices, friendly jokes, plans for the evening. You realize, the silence wasn't absence. It was presence. And now that it's lifted, it leaves behind a kind of clarity, like fog after rain. You smile to yourself. And promise to bring a little more of that silence with you when you leave. You're settling onto the drying bench with your now loyal tenagui, when a small commotion near the entrance catches your attention. A group of kids tumble in, half-dressed, half-laughing, fully dripping. Behind them, an elder with the calmness of 1,000 baths just raises an eyebrow. Instantly, the children freeze, bow, and proceed to behave like tiny, soggy monks. Welcome to the social ballet of bathing order, Edo style. Because in this world of buckets and steam, the order in which you bathe matters. And no, it's not just first come, first soak. You're about to learn the subtle rules that governed who scrubbed where, when, and in what direction. Let's start with kids. In most neighborhoods, children went first, not as a privilege, but because it kept them out of the way before the grown-ups arrived. Splashing, noise, mess? That's a pre-dignity hour activity. If you showed up too late and found kids still in the bath, you'd probably wait it out, unless you wanted your serenity hijacked by a ladle duel. Next came the working class, craftsmen, merchants, laborers, who bathed after a long day of hauling, hammering, or haggling. They were usually quick, efficient, focused. A rinse, a scrub, a soak. Minimal fuss. No time for philosophizing in the corner tub. Then, you had the elderly and community figures, who often bathed later in the evening, enjoying longer soaks and quiet conversations. And believe it or not, they did have a certain unspoken seniority. If an elder entered the udono, people often shifted aside to give them space. Not out of fear, but out of respect. You don't hog the hot spot when grandma's ready to dip. You ask someone how all this is decided. Is there a list? A rotation chart? A village schedule? They smile. Everyone just knows. You start to understand that bathing here is like a local orchestra. Every player knows when to enter, how loud to be, and when to exit with grace. And if you're off-key, you get the eyebrow. No second warning needed. In some communities, this order got codified in charmingly strange ways. You hear about neighborhoods that determined bath order by drawing wooden lots each evening. Others had a system where whoever fetched the firewood got to soak first. Talk about motivation. And of course, there were always exceptions. One old man tells you about a neighbor who insisted he had a medical condition that required first soaking rites. He was 35, fit as a fiddle. Eventually, the community just gave him a special bench, farthest from the heat. But one of the most interesting quirks. Some bathhouses offered separate hours by status. For example, apprentices might have their own allotted time, separate from their masters. Courtesans might bathe earlier, quietly escorted in and out. Samurai. They came at off-peak hours, partly for privacy, partly because no one wanted to argue with a man carrying a sword and a towel. And then there were the coin-toss neighborhoods. Once a week, people would literally toss a coin to see who bathed first. It wasn't official, just a fun way to level the playing field and sneak in some low-stakes gambling. The rule was, if you win, you soak. If you lose, you pour tea for the winner while they do it. You imagine that made for some very polite, very strategic rivalry. Historians have tried to map these customs, but documentation is scarce. Most of this was oral culture, passed down by practice, not parchment. Some researchers say this fluidity made Edo bathing culture organized chaos. Others argue it was one of the most self-regulating systems of social etiquette in the period. Either way, you're watching it happen in real time. A boy finishes scrubbing and offers his spot to an elder without a word. A merchant steps aside for a man with a limp. No one says anything, but everyone moves in sync. You realize this isn't just bathing. It's choreography. It's respect. It's the kind of quiet code that doesn't need signs, just steam, rhythm, and the occasional reminder from a very powerful eyebrow. You're heading back to the bathhouse after a brief walk through the moonlit alleyways of Edo, thinking you've pretty much seen it all. Hot water, etiquette, children being mildly terrifying with ladles. But tonight's bath feels different. The doors slide open. The lights are dimmer. The conversation, quieter. A few familiar faces are missing. And then someone whispers, "Midnight soak." You've accidentally wandered into one of Edo's lesser-known and strangely magical rituals, the nighttime bath. In a city that woke early and worked hard, bathing usually happened in the early evening, just after sunset, when the day's work was done and before curfew bells rang across the city. But for certain people, night guards, performers, monks, and the occasionally insomniac poet, bathing after dark wasn't just routine. It was sacred. You're told that night bathing had a different purpose. It wasn't just for cleaning your body, it was for washing the day off your soul. The bathhouse itself changed. Lanterns replaced oil lamps. The temperature was often slightly cooler, the steam thicker, the shadows deeper. You step into the changing room and immediately sense it. No clatter, no hustle. Just the sound of soft water trickling, someone gently adjusting a bucket, and the occasional whisper between close friends. There's no rush. No one's on their lunch break. Everyone here came with the intent to linger. You join them, easing into the water slowly, the heat wrapping around you like a secret. And then, as your eyes adjust to the dim light, you notice something odd. The bathhouse ceiling has holes. Tiny ones. A deliberate pattern. They let moonlight in. Not a lot, just enough. Just enough to let the full moon, if she's generous, cast a shimmer across the water. You ask someone quietly about it, and they nod. Some believe moonlight helps clear dreams from the mind. You're not sure if that's science or poetry, but honestly, you don't care. It's beautiful either way. Midnight baths were common during festivals, seasonal transitions, and religious observances. In some households, it was believed that bathing right before the lunar calendar's new month brought good fortune. For others, it was about resetting one's energy. A way of saying, whatever happened today, it ends here. And yes, it had a practical side, too. Performers from the ukiyo-e world, dancers, singers, actors, often worked late into the night. For them, the bath wasn't just relaxing, it was essential. Imagine removing kabuki makeup without modern soap. Or washing off a day of layered silk and perfume in a home with no plumbing. The bathhouse became their green room, their chapel, their therapist's office. Some samurai also preferred night baths. You hear a hushed story about one who would always come after dark to avoid being seen. He said the steam made it easier to forget the faces of the day, someone tells you. Even courtesans, especially the high-ranking ones who kept separate from the public eye, sometimes arranged private nighttime baths, quiet, candlelit affairs where they could exist without performance. Academics still debate whether this whole midnight bathing trend was widespread or more of a niche practice among specific groups. Some say it was common during summer, when cooler night air made hot water bearable. Others insist it was always rare, more ritual than routine. But as you sit there now, feeling the contrast between the warm water and the cool air brushing your neck, you understand why people came. It's not just a bath. It's a sigh you get to sit inside. Someone pours a slow ladleful of water behind your shoulders. It trickles down like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. You lean back, and for the first time in days, your mind just stops. You emerge from the midnight bathlighter, as if the water rinsed something off that wasn't even visible. But just as you begin to dry off, you notice something peculiar at the far end of the dressing room. A woman sits on a stool, surrounded by bowls, brushes, and what looks like a small apothecary shop. But she's not making medicine. She's doing her hair, and not just brushing. This is an operation, a ritual, a full-on performance of coils, oils, wraps, and carefully calculated architecture. You sit nearby, pretending to dry your arm for 20 minutes straight while watching in awe. Welcome to the elegant, complex, occasionally terrifying world of Edo period hair care, especially for women, where the bath may have relaxed the body, but the hair? That's where the work really began. In a time without modern shampoo, conditioner, blow dryers, or cute pastel scrunchies, keeping long hair healthy was a full-time job. And many of these routines happened after the bath, not during. Why? Because you don't wash your hair in the bath. Not in the tub. Not near the tub. And definitely not in the communal water. You ask someone why. They answer like it's the most obvious thing in the world. Hair is complicated. Bathwater is communal. You keep them separate. Fair enough. So instead, hair was washed with herbal infusions, most commonly made from rice bran water, camellia oil, or fermented rinses that, honestly, smelled better than most things sold in your average store today. Some women used a mix of crushed azuki beans and water to clean their scalps, which sounds weird until you realize it was both cleansing and exfoliating, and kind of brilliant. You watch as the woman dips her comb into a small dish of oil, runs it through a section of her hair, and carefully begins forming the first loop of a traditional shimada style, a high, rounded bun worn by married women and courtesans alike. It looks effortless, but you're pretty sure it requires math. And this isn't just for looks. Hairstyles in Edo were social statements. They told people your age, your marital status, sometimes even your profession. Young girls wore yuawata, loose styles with colorful ribbons. Unmarried women might opt for takashimada, high and decorative. Married, lower and more practical. Widowed, simpler still. A hairstyle could say, I'm in love, I'm available, I'm wealthy, or don't talk to me unless you're offering a stable rice stipend. You ask how long it takes to learn these styles. Someone chuckles. Years. And a friend with steady hands. There were even professional hairdressers, many of whom made regular rounds to bathhouses and wealthier homes. They carried kits full of combs, pins, and oils like stylists crossed with herbalists. Getting your hair done wasn't just maintenance, it was a social ritual, often paired with tea, gossip, and the occasional dramatic reveal. You ask about haircuts. Big mistake. The woman next to you looks scandalized. Cut it. Why? Turns out, cutting long hair, especially for women, was rare, symbolic, and often dramatic. You cut your hair if you were entering a temple, or mourning, or starting over after a very messy breakup. For most people, hair was a lifelong investment. There's even a rumor you hear, whispered of course, that some courtesans had such elaborate hairpieces built into their styles that they couldn't lie down. They had to sleep with wooden neck blocks to protect the shape overnight. You try to imagine that. You fail. Academics continue to debate just how extensive hair care rituals were across class lines. Some claim it was mostly a city phenomenon, tied to fashion and social status. Others argue that even in rural areas, hair was a source of pride, maintained with local herbs, passed down methods, and pure muscle memory. But here's what's clear. For many Edo people, hair wasn't an afterthought. It was a living timeline, something you carried through childhood, adulthood, marriage, grief. It aged with you, changed with you, and yes, got carefully oiled, rinsed, and arranged after the bath, never during. As you finally stand, fully dry, the woman beside you finishes her final loop. She smooths it with a cloth, secures it with a comb, and stands with the quiet confidence of someone who just reassembled herself in front of a tiny mirror and 3 bowls of bean water. She catches your eye and smiles, not smugly, just knowingly. You nod, because you get it now. The bath cleans the body. The hair, that's for the soul. You've dried off. Your hair, while not exactly stylish, is at least behaving. You're ready to float back into the city streets when you hear the unmistakable sound of wood being chopped, rhythmic, sharp, and somehow desperate. You follow it around to the back of the bathhouse and find 3 men sweating over a huge stack of logs. One of them looks up, wipes his brow, and mutters, "Tonight's water won't heat itself." Ah, of course. You've entered the world of firewood economics, the steamy underbelly, pun intended, of Edo's obsession with cleanliness. Because here's the thing, every hot bath in Edo required fire. Lots of it. And fire needed fuel. And fuel wasn't cheap. You watch as the men haul logs toward the enormous iron comma, the cauldron used to heat water for the entire bathhouse. It sits in a blackened pit, flames licking the underside, and a thin trail of smoke curling into the dusk like a sigh from the bathhouse itself. It takes hours to heat the water. Constant feeding. Constant stirring. Someone always has to be watching, adjusting the draft, keeping the heat just right. Not too fast or it scalds. Not too slow or it doesn't reach full soak temperature. The man closest to you leans on his axe and explains, "We burn softwood early to start it. Hardwood to hold it. Scrap to stretch it." He says it like a chef describing a fine recipe. You soon realize that heating the bath is a logistical ballet, and behind the relaxed front of every soak is an army of workers chopping, hauling, stoking, and sweating so you don't have to. And of course, firewood costs money. Bathhouses weren't run on goodwill. They charged entrance fees, which fluctuated based on neighborhood, day of the week, and sometimes the rumored quality of the heat. A better bathhouse might claim to use pure cedar fuel for a smoother steam. Others just quietly threw in old sandals when no one was looking. Don't ask. For the average Edo citizen, especially the lower classes, these fees could add up. So what did people do? They got clever. Some shared bathhouse memberships. Others negotiated monthly passes with their local yuya. Children sometimes bathed for free if they helped with chores, cleaning, sweeping, or fetching water from the well. Then there were off-peak bathers, people who came late, after the main rush, when the water was still warm but no new fuel needed to be burned. It wasn't quite as hot, but hey, it was cheap. One woman tells you proudly, "I get the steam for half the price." And fewer gossipers. Respect. Some neighborhoods even had water cooperatives, where multiple households pooled money to support a single bathhouse. You imagine the group chat for that. "Tanaka-san, please stop bringing rice balls into the tub. We've talked about this." And if you couldn't afford the bathhouse at all, you might settle for a home bucket bath, heated with scraps, leftover straw, old paper, broken chopsticks. One man tells you he used to bathe with fire borrowed from the kitchen, meaning he snuck his water pot onto the cooking fire when his mother wasn't looking. Occasionally, during cold winters, firewood became so scarce that some bathhouses had to close early. Or worse, Reuse yesterday's water. Gasp. Historians have long noted that the bathhouse economy mirrored Edo's broader systems, highly localized, semi-regulated, and full of workarounds. Some even argue that monitoring firewood supplies was a way to measure class tension. If one district had longer bath lines than another, something was off. And while the Bakufu, shogunate government, mostly left bathhouses alone, it did sometimes step in, setting maximum prices, regulating fuel sources, or restricting bathhouse construction to prevent overcrowding. Because too many baths too close together meant too much fire, and in a wooden city, that's how disasters happened. You glance back at the woodpile. It's taller than you. And suddenly, your luxurious soak feels less like magic and more like manual labor, skillfully hidden. You thank the man with the axe. He shrugs and smiles. Come tomorrow morning. It'll be warm again. You believe him. Because behind every peaceful soak is a fire quietly burning, a log quietly splitting, and someone quietly making it all possible. You're back at the bathhouse entrance, about to step inside, when a middle-aged man in a blue yukata sidles up beside you, looks around conspiratorially, and says, "You know, this place used to be mixed." You raise an eyebrow. Still is. Sometimes. He smirks. Not like that. And just like that, you're pulled into the steamy, whispered world of forbidden mixed bathing, a tale of custom, controversy, moral panic, and some very creative loopholes. Back in the early Edo period, as you've already learned, mixed bathing, kanyoku, was the norm. Men and women bathed together in a matter-of-fact, shoulders above water, don't make this weird kind of way. But as time went on, especially by the 1700s, the government got nervous. You see, Edo was becoming more urban, more crowded, and more socially performative. Modesty became trendier. Morality edicts started to pile up like firewood. Officials decided that shared nudity was unseemly and declared, with great fanfare, that mixed bathing would henceforth be banned. On paper, anyway. In practice, not so fast. Because bathhouses didn't just vanish overnight. They adapted. Some split the bath hours by gender. Others put up flimsy wooden screens, so technically people weren't in the same tub. Some built half-height walls, just tall enough to give a hint of separation, but short enough that one accidental lean meant your bath turned into a neighborhood reunion. And many, especially smaller, family-run places, just ignored the ban. Or at least, they interpreted it loosely. The idea was, as long as no one's causing trouble, who's really counting the legs under the water? You're told about one bathhouse that posted a sign reading, "Separate rooms available upon polite request." Which, in Edo terms, meant, we won't stop you from mixing, just don't be weird about it. This ambiguity gave rise to layers of social gamesmanship. Courting couples sometimes arranged to, coincidentally, arrive during overlapping hours. Local romantics passed along bathhouse schedules like coded messages. And in some towns, mixed bathing was a subtle class statement. The upper class avoided it, the common folk embraced it. The man next to you laughs and says, "My grandfather said he met my grandmother in a bathhouse. She threw a ladle at him for talking too much. He said that's how he knew she was the one." Romantic. Even foreign visitors were confused. Some Dutch traders recorded their absolute shock at Japan's relaxed bathing culture. Men and women together, as if they were siblings, one journal exclaimed. Others, predictably, turned it into salacious gossip, fueling myths back in Europe about Japan being one endless co-ed spa. Historians today are still debating the actual frequency of mixed bathing post-ban. Some argue it quietly persisted into the late 1800s, especially in rural areas. Others suggest it mostly vanished from major cities after stricter enforcement in the mid-1700s. But everyone agrees on one thing. Mixed bathing was never just about bathing. It was about rules and resistance. About how public space could be flexible, playful, and occasionally, defiant. And about how who you bathed with reflected more than just hygiene habits. It reflected your social status, gender norms, and maybe even your level of boldness. You finally step inside and glance toward the tub. Just a few people in there now. All men, tonight. But you notice something else, a faint line on the floor, a darker strip of wood, where a divider used to be. It's gone now, but its memory remains, like a ghost of the rules that once stood here. And you think, maybe this place remembers more than people do. The man claps you on the shoulder and walks off. Don't worry, he says, on festival days, things still get flexible. You laugh. Because of course they do. You're sitting in the drying room again, comfortably half-dazed from your soak, when the sliding door creaks open and someone walks in who seems to shift the temperature of the entire room, not with heat, but with presence. He's tall, quiet, wearing only a towel and a look that says, "Don't talk to me unless it's absolutely necessary." And then you see it, the katana, gently resting against the wall near his folded clothes. Ah, a samurai. You straighten your posture without meaning to. Everyone else subtly adjusts too. Not out of fear exactly, but out of respect, and maybe a little fear. You've just entered one of Edo Japan's more delicate social equations. Samurai plus bathhouse equals complicated etiquette. Because yes, samurai bathed too. Of course they did. But unlike merchants or artisans, they carried with them a certain gravity, and sometimes an actual weapon. And that made the bathhouse, a supposedly equalizing space, a little tense. Technically, bathhouses were open to all classes, including samurai, peasants, craftsmen, and merchants, though courtiers and nobles generally had private bathing arrangements. But the social expectations didn't dissolve with the clothes. When a samurai entered, the rules shifted, just a little. You learn quickly, don't sit too close. Don't enter or exit the tub before him if you can help it. And above all, don't touch the sword. Even if it's leaning comically close to your towel. Even if it's tipping over. Just let it fall. The sword was never left unattended, by the way. If a samurai disrobed, he placed the katana within reach, usually on a wooden rack beside his stool or resting against the tub's edge. And no one questioned it. It wasn't just a weapon, it was his identity. Some bathhouses even built special shelves or pegs just for swords, so they wouldn't get wet or slide into danger zones. You imagine the carpenters adding katana parking to their design notes. But despite the tension, most samurai didn't want to cause trouble. In fact, many came late at night or early in the morning to avoid crowds, preferring solitude to spectacle. You hear of one who paid extra to reserve a quiet hour, not because he feared confrontation, but because he simply liked bathing without small talk. You also learn that even samurai had their awkward moments. One tale tells of a young retainer who slipped on a wet floor and landed sword first in the water. It took 3 months for the rust to be removed, and longer for the embarrassment to fade. The local gossip network had a field day. Historically, the presence of samurai in bathhouses raised legal and social questions. Could you confront one for breaking the rules? Could you ask them to wait their turn? Officially, yes. Realistically, not if you valued your peace and your knees. Yet surprisingly, many samurai were careful to follow etiquette. Bathing was considered a mark of refinement. An unkempt appearance dishonored not just oneself, but one's clan. So they followed the procedures: washing before soaking, silence in the tub, drying without fuss. Some even engaged in bathhouse culture beyond just bathing. They shared poetry, discussed philosophy, or quietly watched the world without judgment. In the anonymity of steam, a merchant and a samurai might share the same water, and for 10 minutes, the world outside melted away. But of course, not every samurai was so chill. You hear hushed stories, one about a jealous retainer who mistook a harmless glance for flirtation and dunked a fellow bather mid-sentence. The result: a brief scuffle, one broken bucket, and a permanent bath ban. The phrase, "don't start drama in the sento," became neighborhood shorthand for choose your battles wisely. You glance back at the man now. He's sitting quietly, pouring water over his shoulders with precision. No fuss, no flex, just calm, controlled motion. His sword rests on a nearby bench, wrapped in cloth but unmistakably present. And somehow, the room feels balanced again. Because in the end, even samurai needed warmth. Stillness. A place to lower their guard, just enough to sweat out the day. You nod to him politely as you leave. He doesn't respond, but you sense he notices. You step outside, the cool air wrapping around your shoulders. Even in Edo, everyone, warrior or not, needed a place to soften. You return to the bathhouse earlier than usual today, just as the doors slide open for the first soak. The morning sun filters through slatted windows, lighting up swirling dust like golden mist. But your attention is drawn to something you hadn't noticed before: the walls. Specifically, the art on them. Not murals exactly. Not random decorations. These are painted scenes, stretching across the cedar panels. Mountains, pine trees, cranes mid-flight, waterfalls tumbling into mist, and in one corner, what looks suspiciously like Mount Fuji being photobombed by a very dramatic carp. This isn't just decor. It's advertising. Welcome to the aesthetic arms race of Edo bathhouses, where owners competed not only with water temperature or opening hours, but with something even more powerful: vibes. In a city packed with bathhouses, hundreds of them at one point, how do you stand out? Clean water was expected. Hot water, too. But what if your bathhouse was also beautiful? What if it transported you, just a little, while you soaked your stress away? And so began the trend of bathhouse artwork, or sento bijutsu. These were usually painted directly on wood panels inside the udono, often stretching across entire walls. Some showed natural landscapes, a reminder of the mountains and forests people left behind to live in the city. Others depicted mythical animals, or tales from folklore, subtly placed to inspire or comfort. You ask an attendant if all the paintings mean something. He smiles and shrugs. Some were just copied from old woodblock prints. But if you stare long enough, everything starts to look meaningful. That tracks. And the art didn't stop at paintings. Some bathhouses installed intricately carved beams, or calligraphy plaques with poetic verses like, "Steam clears the body, silence clears the mind." You pass one that reads, "A single ladle returns the world to balance." You have no idea what it means, but you love it anyway. Outside the bath area, signage played a different role: marketing. Owners got clever. Painted signs promised things like, "The softest steam in Edo." A water heated with pure pine wood, no scrap lumber. And now with free brand packs for first-timers. You realize that, even in the 1700s, people responded to branding. Some bathhouses developed mascots: stylized cranes, lucky turtles, or cheerful boys holding buckets. One even painted a running horse on its signboard, implying the soak was so good you'd leave as strong as a stallion. You wonder if it worked. You kind of want to try that one now. And the art wasn't just for the customers. Bathhouse owners used it as a way to signal class, quality, and respectability. A clean, well-painted bathhouse said, "We care." A peeling, faded mural? That meant cut corners. Maybe reused water. Maybe gossip. Some high-end bathhouses even hired local ukiyo-e artists, the same ones who made famous woodblock prints of kabuki actors and courtesans, to design their interiors. It was subtle flexing: "We may scrub backs, but we have taste." Historians still debate whether these art-filled sento were the norm or the exception. Some argue that in poorer districts, art was minimal, just a brushstroke of pine here, a stencil of a bird there. Others claim even modest bathhouses made an effort, because even the idea of beauty made the experience feel elevated. And there's something else: art set the mood. A mountain scene might cool your mind on a summer day. A river might make the heat feel gentler. A crane in flight might remind you to breathe slower. You weren't just bathing, you were drifting. You return to your spot by the wall and stare at the painting again. There's a subtle figure now you hadn't noticed before. Tiny, at the edge of a cliff, watching the mist roll in. Alone, but not lonely. You wonder if someone painted that as a quiet message, or just because they liked cliffs. Either way, it stays with you. Because in a city where every day was crowded, noisy, and fast, stepping into a painted landscape, even just for 10 minutes, was enough to make the world feel wide again. You sink back into the steam. A crane flaps its wings above your head. And for a moment, the bathhouse becomes a story you get to live inside. The bathhouse is quieter today, and the air carries a strange but pleasant scent, earthy, citrusy, a little like green tea, a little like grandma's garden. You notice that instead of plain water, the tub is now swirling with floating yuzu peels. Someone next to you grins and says, "It's Toji Day." You blink. "Bless you." They laugh. Winter solstice. Herb bath time. Welcome to the warm, fragrant, oddly medical world of herbal baths in Edo, Japan, where soaking wasn't just about cleanliness, it was also prescription. Edo people didn't have access to modern medicine as we know it, but they did have centuries of folk knowledge, Chinese medical theory, and trial-by-bucket tradition. And in many communities, baths weren't just a way to relax, they were used to heal. You step into the tub and immediately feel the difference. The citrus oils from the yuzu peels sting a tiny cut on your knee, but then soothe everything else. You take a deep breath and feel your chest clear. Maybe it's the steam. Maybe it's placebo. Maybe it's 300 years of wisdom floating in fruit. Yuzu wasn't the only option, of course. On any given seasonal day, the bathhouse might add a mugwort, yamogi, for circulation and skin, a ginger slices, for warming the body in winter, a sakura leaves, for beauty and poetry, scientifically unconfirmed, but spiritually solid, a persimmon leaves, which some believed calmed nerves and lightened the spirit, or, on really special days, a mix of medicinal roots and bark, steeped like a giant human teabag. You're told some recipes were handed down in families, others whispered by traveling monks or local healers. Some bathhouses even became known for their signature blends, drawing regulars with promises like, "Soak away your cough," or "Steam for clarity of thought." And here's the fun part, it kind of worked. Modern researchers have studied many of these herbs and found they do have mild effects, anti-inflammatory properties, immune support, improved circulation. So maybe Edo people weren't just being poetic. Maybe Grandma really did know what she was doing with that bundle of bitter orange leaves. In some districts, herbal bath days followed the lunar calendar, aligning with seasonal transitions. Spring baths to shed winter fatigue. Summer baths to ward off illness. Autumn baths for grief. Winter baths to prepare the body for long nights and cold floors. The most famous of all? Toji no Yu, the winter solstice bath, traditionally infused with yuzu. Still practiced in parts of Japan today. The belief was that yuzu's strong scent would chase away evil, warm the body, and keep colds at bay. It was also just really, really nice. You watch as a child scoops up a floating yuzu slice and pretends it's a tiny boat. An elder next to her chuckles and says, "You'll have clear skin now. That one's lucky." You decide not to steal the boat. Probably. Herbal baths were also popular among courtesans, monks, and traveling performers, all of whom needed to keep their bodies in working condition. And while the upper class had access to private herbal soaks, for the rest of Edo, these fragrant bathhouse days were shared wellness moments, medicine made communal. You ask the attendant if people ever took things too far. He nods solemnly. Once a man brought his own onion bath mix. We evacuated the room in under 2 minutes. Note to self, never bring onions to a sento. Historians suggest these practices reveal a lot about how Edo people approached health, not as something separate from daily life, but woven into it. Bathing, eating, sleeping, and herbal knowledge were a single system, not a checklist of separate actions. And maybe that's what you're feeling now, soaking in this citrusy haze. Not just relaxation, but a quiet, ancient kind of care, where the body and the seasons move together, and health isn't something you chase, it's something you steep in. You close your eyes. The yuzu slice bobs gently past. You're waiting for the bath to cool just a little, your skin still tingling from that surprisingly zesty yuzu infusion, when you hear it again. A voice. Not singing. Not shouting. Just talking. Smooth. Casual. Extremely well-informed. You peek around the corner and see her, the bathhouse attendant. Not the boiler guy. Not the guy with the ladle. This is her domain. A middle-aged woman in a perfectly tied apron, moving between the shelves and the buckets like a general in soft slippers. She's not just keeping things clean, she's keeping the whole place running. And more than that, she knows everything. Welcome to the bathhouse gossip economy, where attendants, especially female ones, weren't just support staff. They were part therapist, part scheduler, part information network. You sidle closer, pretending to admire a particularly well-crafted bucket, and listen. She's talking to a regular. Something about a fish seller who's been visiting a different bathhouse 3 streets over. He says it's for the water quality. Then she offers a knowing glance. And just like that, you're hooked. You learn quickly that bathhouse attendants were the invisible backbone of Edo bathing culture. They welcomed guests, managed the front desk, handled coins, cleaned up the washing areas, restocked towels, occasionally enforced rules, gently or firmly, depending on the offender, and, crucially, absorbed every detail. Who came in early? Who stayed too long? Who started bringing someone new? Who stopped showing up? It wasn't malicious. It was maintenance. Of the social kind. You hear her greet an elder by name, offer him his usual corner stool, and remind him to take it slow today because of the shoulder. He doesn't correct her. He just nods. That shoulder's been acting up. Later, she helps a child find her grandmother's tenugui by describing the exact pattern. 3 white cranes with a red border? That's obeisance. You didn't even know you could recognize towels that well. This kind of relational memory is half superpower, half survival skill. Bathhouse attendants, especially women, were often working-class widows, older daughters, or local aunts who knew the neighborhood inside and out. And through their work, they became essential social nodes, gatekeepers of rhythm, routine, and rumor. You ask a different bather if the attendant ever gets the gossip wrong. She laughs. Wrong? She knew I was pregnant before I did. Yikes. Respect. Some bathhouse attendants doubled as matchmakers, discreetly introducing regulars who happened to share a bathing schedule and a preference for quiet soaking. Others acted as informal dispute mediators, passing polite messages between feuding neighbors too stubborn to speak directly. One even tells you proudly, I once stopped a divorce. Just by listening. Academics today are fascinated by this phenomenon. Some call it horizontal authority, power that doesn't come from title or status, but from being everywhere, seeing everything, and being trusted by everyone. The bathhouse attendant wasn't a ruler, but she could definitely steer the ship. And the bathhouse itself supported this. Many sento had small counters or backrooms where attendants sat, folded towels, and chatted with regulars over tea. Not interrogations, just daily maintenance of community ties. A bath and a bit of banter. That's all it took. Of course, not all attendants were gentle. You hear of one legendary woman who once chased a rowdy group of teenage boys out with a broom, and somehow did it without raising her voice. She just walked slowly, broom in hand, like a calm storm approaching. They never came back. You like to imagine she's still out there, somewhere, watching. Back in your current bathhouse, the attendant is now discussing someone's upcoming tofu shop renovation, adjusting the drying towels, and giving you a small nod that says, don't stay in too long. Your ears are pink. She's right. You towel off, bow slightly, and head toward the changing room. And as you do, you realize something. This place may run on firewood, coins, and steam, but it survives on people like her. It's a full moon tonight. You notice it as you step out of the bathhouse for a bit of fresh air, round, glowing, hanging over the rooftops like it has something to say. You weren't planning to come back for another soak so soon, but then someone says, don't miss tonight. It's a tsukimi you. You're back inside before they finish the sentence. Turns out, this isn't just any bath night. It's a moon bath. You've soaked in steam, citrus, herbal leaves, and near-boiling regret, but tonight, you'll bathe with the lunar calendar itself. In Edo Japan, seasonal and lunar rhythms deeply shaped daily life. Markets followed moon cycles. Festivals were scheduled by celestial patterns. And yes, even bathhouses got in on the action. On certain moon phases, especially full moons, some bathhouses offered special lunar baths. These were believed to have cleansing, calming, and restorative powers, especially if timed with seasonal shifts, like spring's first bloom or autumn's turning leaves. You hear someone murmur, "The moon brings memory to the surface." You're not entirely sure what that means, but it feels true. You walk into the Udono and everything feels a bit different. The lanterns are dimmed. A large window panel is open, allowing moonlight to spill directly onto the surface of the water. It glows faintly, rippling with silver. Someone has placed seasonal flowers at the edge of the tub, chrysanthemums, tonight, and a soft trace of incense lingers in the air, spicy and floral. And no one's talking. This is a soak for reflection. You ease in. Tonight's bathwater includes a gentle blend of seasonal herbs, too. Nothing strong, just a whisper of mugwort and pine. The attendant tells you quietly that the pine holds your thoughts in place, and the mugwort loosens the ones you don't need. You believe her instantly, because, honestly, it smells like peace. Moon baths were especially popular with artists, monks, and anyone going through something existential, which, frankly, is all of us at some point. The idea was that the moon's clarity could help clarify the self. You didn't just get clean. You got aligned. You hear a story about a poet who once refused to bathe any night except the full moon. Another tale tells of a courtesan who took moon baths before making big decisions, because, she said, the moon doesn't lie. But it does listen. Some bathhouses marked moon baths on their lunar calendars, posted at the entrance. You notice one now. It's hand-painted, a simple wooden board with brushstroke circles, dark for new moons, bright for full. Certain nights are marked with subtle symbols, a leaf, a raindrop, a tiny wave. You ask what those mean. Those, someone says, are good soaking nights. You wonder what kind of night this is. You sink deeper into the warmth. It's said that on moon bath nights, people were encouraged to soak longer, move slower, and speak less. Not out of formality, but because the water was working on more than just your muscles. And tonight, that's exactly what it feels like. You begin to notice small things, the shadow of your breath on the steam, the rhythm of water trickling down your arm, the reflection of the moon trembling ever so slightly with every shift. You stay in longer than usual. No one says anything, because everyone is doing the same. Outside, the streets are quieter. Even the neighborhood dogs seem subdued. Maybe they're moonbathing too. Eventually, you rise, wrap your towel gently, and make your way to the open-air corridor. A breeze passes. You look up at the moon. It says nothing, but it says enough. Tonight's bath is quiet, the crowd thinner, the atmosphere softer. You're almost used to this now. The rhythm, the rules, the heat that feels like a hug with boundaries. But as you settle into the steam, you hear someone behind the changing curtain whisper, "Again." Then someone else replies, "Second time this month." And the attendant mutters, "Better keep the door unlocked tonight." You're about to ignore it when someone leans in and says, "You haven't heard about the bathhouse incidents?" You blink. Incidents. Welcome to the part of Edo bathing culture that wasn't written on scrolls or celebrated in art. The rumors, scandals, and the occasional crime that made bathhouses not just places of cleansing, but occasionally, the setting for some very steamy drama. Let's get this out of the way. Edo bathhouses weren't dangerous. Most of the time, they were peaceful, structured, and as socially stable as a bowl of perfectly stacked tofu. But sometimes, well, sometimes the water got a little murky. You hear stories, whispered, always, because no one wants to get banned, about lovers meeting under the pretense of a timed soak. About a money pouch going missing from the drying shelf. About a bathhouse that suddenly shut down for deep cleaning, only to reopen a day later under new management and with less silverware. One tale makes the rounds again and again. A woman who slipped out of the women's hour, waited until everyone had left, then met someone in the men's tub. They say it happened 3 times before the attendant caught them. The couple disappeared the next week, rumored to have eloped or been kicked out of town, or, in one version, opened their own bathhouse. You loved that version the most. Bathhouses were semi-public, but often built with small corners, shadowed drying rooms, and back exits for vendors and staff. That made them perfect for secret meetings, romantic or otherwise. Merchants sometimes discussed deals in the steam, away from eavesdropping walls. Apprentices passed gossip or information between rival shops. There are even notes from Edo police logs mentioning suspicious bathhouse activity, usually vague, possibly exaggerated, and always just interesting enough to make you glance over your shoulder. Sometimes the crime was just breaking social codes, like staying in too long, or entering without paying, or, worst of all, failing to clean your washing spot before leaving. Those were the ones people really remembered. You ask the attendant if there was ever a bathhouse brawl. She nods once, gravely. 2 men. Same towel. Both claimed it was theirs. We had to close for the afternoon. The towel survived. The pride did not. Despite these stories, it's important to understand, bathhouses were protected spaces, and most communities kept them that way. Any serious disruption was dealt with swiftly, either by attendants or, more often, by the regulars themselves. You didn't mess around in the bathhouse. It was too important. Still, the occasional tension made it all more vivid. Historians today refer to bathhouses as liminal spaces, places where class, gender, and identity could momentarily shift. When you remove your clothes, status becomes less visible. Boundaries blur. And in that blur, things can happen. Of course, most of the time, nothing dramatic occurred at all. Just water, steam, the familiar sound of ladles and whispers, a towel neatly folded, a story traded like coins between friends. But even in those moments of calm, the possibility lingered. Because a bathhouse was never just a tub. It was a stage. And you never knew what kind of play the steam would hide. You towel off slowly, taking your time. By now, you know where to hang your tenagui, how to bow to the attendant just right, how long to linger without hogging the mirror. You're a regular now, or at least you feel like one. But as you sit by the sliding door, soaking in the residual warmth, you start to realize something deeper. This bathhouse, this ritual, this rhythm, it's done more than clean you. It's changed you. You think back to your first visit. You were awkward, unsure, clutching your towel like it could protect you from centuries of custom. You didn't know where to sit, what to say, or how to survive water heated by the fires of MT Fuji's angrier cousin. Now, you move like steam, quiet, comfortable. You know when to speak, when to stay silent. You can read the signs without reading anything at all. And it makes you wonder, what else has shifted? Because the bathhouse wasn't just about hygiene. It was a mirror. A low wooden room where the day came off with the dirt. Where judgment was suspended, along with clothing, stress, status, and yesterday's bad decisions. You remember how everyone shared the same water. The merchant and the monk. The child and the samurai. The mother and the matchmaker. All soaked under the same roof, heated by the same fire. That kind of humility doesn't wash off. It seeps in. You remember the old man who always got the corner seat. The kid who splashed with the confidence of royalty. The woman with the most intricate bun you've ever seen, who once nodded at you like you were part of something. And now, you are. You step outside, the cool night brushing your cheeks like a second towel. The bathhouse behind you hums quietly, doors sliding, buckets clinking, a soft murmur of laughter from inside. And you realize, you'll miss this. Not just the water, but the slowness, the ceremony. The way time here felt like it moved sideways, not forward. Like each bath wasn't about getting somewhere, but about pausing just long enough to notice yourself again. That's what makes the Sento so enduring, not the architecture, not even the steam, but the way it held space for people to be soft in public. To stop pretending. To return to a body that was always yours but often forgotten. You take one last look at the door. The lantern sways gently in the breeze. Inside, someone laughs. Outside, the moon is still watching. You smile, turn, and walk back into the city. A little cleaner, a little quieter, and never quite the same. Now, the streets of Edo fade behind your eyes. The steam lifts like a curtain, and the sounds of ladles and laughter quiet down into memory. You're not sitting in a wooden tub anymore, but maybe, in some soft way, part of you still is. You're warm. Your breath is slower. Your thoughts, softer around the edges. Tonight, you learned more than just how people bathed. You walked through silence. You sat with strangers. You steeped in a culture that asked nothing from you but presence. No rush. No performance. Just warm water and wooden floors and a moment to simply be. So now, wherever you are, in bed, on the couch, curled up with your own favorite towel, let that feeling stay with you. Let your muscles remember the rhythm. Let your thoughts drift like steam curling under a paper lantern. And let the calm of Edo's bathhouses wrap around you like the lightest cotton robe. You're safe. You're still. And you're already home.